All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar on UpgradeX and CloudSuite. This session is being recorded, as are all our sessions, and they're available at nogalis.com/education. So today we're going to be talking about CloudSuite mostly and the UpgradeX opportunity from Infor for existing clients. So just to jump right in, there's this photo that you've probably seen before. And the quote you've seen before from Charles Phillips, which is "Friends don't let friends build data centers." And this is kind of Infor's new initiative to move everybody to the cloud, and that's kind of really the future of the industry as a whole. I mean, you can look at the different ERP applications, and they're mostly moving to the cloud. So I'd say if you're looking 10, 15 years into the future, the current model of on-site data centers is very likely not going to exist for very many of the clients. Certain industries may or may not apply to, but certainly in the next 5 years, you're going to see a very big move to the cloud, and some of the incentives that are being placed in definitely make it easier for organizations to see the benefits of moving to cloud much earlier than they would otherwise without the incentive. So an UpgradeX, I feel, is one of those incentives that Infor has put in place right now. So we'll talk about that. So why move? Why do this UpgradeX, and why move to the cloud as an organization? So really, it breaks down to your predictable long-term total cost of ownership of the application, the elimination of maintenance, hardware, disaster recovery, operating system licenses, and even some third-party application licenses and upgrades. Your single point of accountability, which really becomes kind of the host, which is Infor, and improved performance and availability of backed by SLAs that Infor has put into place, and really being able to utilize your staff for other things within IT that don't necessarily have to do with keeping your servers up. But really, in our own words, some of the things that we've heard from customers has been eliminating complex upgrades every 3 to 4 years. As you know, if you've been with Lawson for any amount of time, you've probably gone through at least one upgrade, and you know that those can be pretty large projects, and they can involve several people and several thousands of dollars worth of work, and really the internal resources that are involved are probably a big enough project, and you have to many times bring in outside resources to do that sort of work. Eliminating hardware replacement costs every 4 to 5 years. Now, you may not be doing it every 4 to 5 years, but a lot of organizations do, and that's a pretty large cost. Not just the actual cost of the hardware itself, but the project that it takes to do that. It's sometimes a very big deal. Limited technical resources. I mean, we're all dealing with that, even as Infor partners. There's always a limited pool of talent out there that we can pull on, and I'm sure as customers you've seen that, especially as of late. And then one thing a lot of people don't consider, and this was from a client, which is the time required for budgeting, procurement, and contracting for professional services, software, and hardware. So this isn't just getting and putting the stuff in place, but the time required to negotiate all that stuff and get it on paper and schedule it and do that. And you know, no one's more familiar with it than we are, really, dealing with clients every day where the project is an urgent project, but it still takes a month sometimes longer to get everything done and out of the way so we can start work. I mean, more and more, especially healthcare organizations, have requirements for background checks and drug testing and things like that. And while those things are easy to do, they do take time, and that can lead to just kind of added cost really to the organization. So to me, the biggest one here is this built-in redundancy, replication, and recovery. So I'm going to do a quick little poll here to find out how many of you have a disaster recovery plan that you that is currently functional? So let's go ahead and run this poll here. I'm very curious to see what percentages have that in place. So when I talk about a disaster recovery plan, I'm really talking about if there was a smoking crater where your building is now, how long before you could be up and running again. So I'm not talking about a backup plan. We should all have that, but the disaster recovery plan is one where, again, there's a smoking crater the next morning, God forbid, and how long before the company is back on its feet from an IT perspective. So I see here quite a few of you have voted. So about exactly a third of you don't have, let's see, attendees can see results. Let's see, percentage. Let's see if we can do that. I'm not sure if you were able to see that, the results of that, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but a third of you do not have a disaster recovery plan in place. So, and the 2/3 of you that do, good for you, but you probably remember how painful that was and how much that cost. I mean, there isn't just a resources and a long-term project. There's actual real hardware costs, real software costs, and real, a data center in a co-location, and quite a bit of cost involved in getting that done. So just eliminating that to me is the biggest reason for an organization like ours to move to the cloud, which we have been for some time. And then timely upgrades and service packs. So this is kind of being repeated in a way, but when you think about it, it isn't, because most of us, in fact, everyone I've ever dealt with, has done the upgrade later than they originally wanted to or anticipated. So it's always kind of one of those things that you want to do this year, and then it gets pushed into the next year and the following quarter and whatnot. So this kind of makes it such that upgrades are available to clients as they're available, and they're already in place, and you'll get some, obviously you'll get some choice as to exactly when you want to deploy that, but the fact that you don't have to go through an upgrade project yourself is a very big deal. And by the way, here when I talk about upgrades in this context, these are the ongoing upgrades, not the first one, which is the UpgradeX project itself. That's a little bit more involved, obviously. So the other big reason that I feel going to the cloud is kind of a big advantage for a lot of organizations is all the different regulatory compliances that you normally would have to put in place. I work with a customer that just in the past few months, we were helping them become PCI compliant. And that was a very big project for this particular customer. They did a lot of credit card processing. So this was a very large project that took several months, a lot of resources on their end, our end, and from a couple of different third parties. HIPAA compliance, we're all very familiar with that. And things like ISO 27001 and ITAR. So I'm not really sure what some of your industry is dealing with, but you probably, at the very least, are dealing with one or two of these compliances, and there's audits that go along with that. And it's important to understand that when you go to the cloud with Infor, you end up on the AWS, which is the Amazon Web Services platform. Now, this is a platform that's actually hosted by Amazon. The same company that you go and buy goods from online also has this amazing cloud infrastructure they've been building really initially for their own business, but then now available to all customers. And with that cloud infrastructure comes some of this compliance, but it is a very shared responsibility between Infor and Amazon to make sure that not just the environment and the platform, but also the application remains and is compliant with all these different standards. So as you can see in this photograph on the right, which isn't very high resolution, but what's important to see is just kind of where the delineation is, that bottom third of the screen being Amazon and that top 2/3 of the screen being kind of that enterprise application and the operating system. That's where the shared responsibility comes in. So it is partly Amazon, but a lot of it is the actual application and the operating system. So if you're looking at other applications, for example, outside of Infor, and they tell you that they're HIPAA compliant or ISO 9000 or ISO 27000 compliant or ITAR compliant because they're in Amazon, that is a misrepresentation if their application isn't also compliant with those standards, because those standards are looking at the whole picture, not just the platform. So it's very important to keep that in mind when you're considering a cloud application, and certainly with Infor, with Lawson on the AWS cloud. These these standards are complied with, and you need to check with your with Infor at whenever you're ready to go to the cloud, which standards are important to you and which ones you want to be compliant with, and whether or not they're compliant with them at that time. But this is a list right now. I don't believe that ITAR is compliant at the moment. I think that's a future one, but the rest I believe are currently in place. Now, the other thing is IT service management, and Infor uses ServiceNow, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Now, ServiceNow uses ITIL v3, and it's kind of the best of breed of this application. And so this is another place where you're kind of saving, really, from an audit perspective and whatnot. If your organization needs to be compliant from a IT service management perspective, this gets you ahead of the game quite a bit. Where you get asset management on the services and servers that you're using. Change in release management is kind of built in to the applications that Infor is provisioning for you. Incident and problem management, this is what, when Infor is managing the application for you in the cloud, those are some of the things that are just going to come with your cloud deployment. Task management and a service catalog. So these are some of the items that typically you wouldn't be thinking about when you're moving to the cloud, but it's very nice to know that they're basically included in your UpgradeX. So how does this work? That's kind of the big question in everybody's mind is it seems like it's a little too big to fit in a kind of a one vision of how do I take all this stuff and put it into the cloud. But in a simplistic form, the basic flow is you work out a contract with Infor, and that probably takes you some time because you need to, each customer is probably a little bit different, and so there is some stuff to work out with Infor. So give some time to that contract negotiation where how does my application move to the cloud? How would I ever go about getting it back if I didn't want to be in the cloud anymore? How does my perpetual licensing work? Where does that go? Can I work something out where I can continue to depreciate that maybe as an asset, because I'm sure you're doing that now. So however your contract is worded may have other effects in your organization. So that does take some time to do, and we've seen that type of thing take quite a bit of time, especially when you're going the UpgradeX route, where you have an existing contract with Infor, and now that's changing, and you want to kind of create some provisions in there for how do I come back to this model if this cloud thing doesn't work for me, and I think that's a very smart thing to do. And then, after all that is done, you get handed off to the cloud operations team at Infor, and that's where they provision the instance for you, and that's basically the system, security, application, setting you up as a tenant, and setting up the database, setting up backup and monitoring, and basically from this point on, you get routine backups, system monitoring and maintenance, and database maintenance, basically as part of the package. So you're not buying anything new, or you don't have to proactively do anything special for that stuff to be in place, which is, again, very nice, because even within your organization, and I've dealt with many clients that thought they had full backups of the system every night. And this is a little tip for everyone on the call. If you're not backing up your LDAP instance, you're not doing a full backup of your Lawson system. Because if everything else comes back up and you don't have a correct and recent updated version of your LDAP repository, you are not going to have a functional Lawson environment the way it was where it went down. So a lot of customers neglect to do that. So that's another one of the things. There's a lot of bits and pieces to the Infor application now, especially with version 10, having added SharePoint and some of these other applications. Making good and usable backups that can be recovered within instances can be a real challenge, and that is basically given to you with the CloudSuite application. Then you go into implementation. So this isn't too far from what you're used to doing, but this is more of a kind of a migration into the cloud. You can think of it as a migration into just another server. There you have to create your users again, and you have to configure the application. You have to train your users in this new environment, whatever this, if you're going from, let's say, 901 to 10, there's going to be some end user training there. You configure the application, you load your codes and parameters, and obviously your data in. So that's really kind of where the bulk of that implementation project is really kind of that data load and getting that part right and actually performing the upgrade. And then at the end, you go live and you turn over support to Infor, and Infor from then on basically owns the application and the server, and really all the responsibility is kind of on them to maintain it. So speaking of that, so roles and responsibilities, just so you kind of know where things fall, and I've kind of got this in a few different layouts, so people prefer looking at this a little differently sometimes. So from a system perspective, so Infor will be obviously installing patches and upgrades, and they'll do your backup and restores for you. That's pretty nice. And what you're responsible for is just your user administration and your job queue management and things like that. From a security perspective, Infor will manage all your SSL certificates. So that is basically SSL certificates that Infor will generate and maintain. And on your end, you're going to create your security classes and roles and users and things like that, which would make sense for your organization. From a database perspective, Infor installs the OS and the database patches and upgrades, and creates and manages and tunes those components, while your organization basically, you basically have this general knowledge of it, and you are using the database, and you can connect to it and that sort of thing, but there's no maintenance really that needs to be done from your end. From an application perspective, Infor is installing patches and upgrades for you, and all you have to do is just basically test those installed patches and upgrades, communicate the test results to Infor, and kind of work through that process. Much like you probably would with any other upgrade. And then you create and manage process flows and custom triggers and workflows as you normally would. So this is a chart that kind of tells you who's primary responsible and who's secondary responsible, and where is optional responsibility lie for, as far as the different components of the CloudSuite model go. Much like what we talked about in the previous slide, and I kind of like this view a little bit better, because this tells you, the customer, or Infor is basically going to provision the solution, provide customer training, provide support, and take care of renewals. Everything else, which is configuring and setup and data migration and integration and reporting, change management and customer training, is either shared responsibility or really the primary responsibility of the customer. So what is in all of this? So as far as UpgradeX goes, or as far as CloudSuite goes, what are we looking at? So how do I choose between the UpgradeX or the other CloudSuite packages that are sitting out there? So I will say what the new model for the cloud application suites is that you purchase the suite for the type of organization you are, for your industry. Okay, so if you're there's a healthcare suite, there's a public sector suite, there's a corporate suite. So you normally would choose that. However, for now, at least for existing clients, there is this UpgradeX option, which is kind of starts with the financials and the procurement and the core technologies, and then you can add bits and pieces to it. And it's really meant to give you exactly what you have right now in the cloud, okay? And it's actually a really, I don't like putting the word bargain when I'm talking about a product that I'm not selling, but it's a really great value in what you're going to get, because not only do you get specifically what you need from today into the cloud, but the upgrade piece is kind of an added bonus where they will perform the upgrade for you, obviously at a cost, but really the upgrade just kind of happens in this magical process of moving to the cloud. So if you're a 901 customer, for example, if you're on the right patch level, you can go from that patch level to the version 10 and end up in the cloud. It really is the fastest way to move to the current kind of CloudSuite setup for Lawson. And this is kind of this ideal thing for the current customer, obviously, as we said. So this is a little bit difficult to read, and I will, this presentation will be available online next week, so you can download it. But just to kind of give you an idea of what the different suites have in them that you would purchase from Infor if you weren't doing the UpgradeX package. So this is the Corporate Enterprise Edition packaging, and it has several different bundles in it. Okay, so there's the Corporate Suite Bundle 1 and 2, Bundle 1, and then Bundle 2, and it has basically just these different components within each bundle. So you would normally be choosing which bundle you want. If you were a net new client, you're very likely looking at it this way and deciding what is it that I want to get. This is the healthcare packaging. Again, this will be available for download, so you can look at the details. But they've packaged a lot of the Infor applications into some of these. So what you're looking at here isn't necessarily all Lawson. There is quite a bit here that would fit the healthcare bundle. You may or may not be using all of it, but you're going to get it in that bundle, so you probably should use it. And this is the public sector view. And I've basically copied and pasted this out of the Infor documentation. This public sector one, I believe, is now available. It wasn't at the time of the presentation that Infor gave. You have to kind of make sure with them because this stuff, again, so this is kind of the new age of computing, this cloud business. So you have to keep pace with it because it changes very rapidly. And it's one of the big advantages of this cloud deployment is that there isn't many disparate versions of things all over the place. There's this big cloud version, so they can change it for everybody relatively quickly. And that sort of the changes that normally would have to be managed very carefully can be done kind of more rapidly, which is nice. So when it comes to calculating your return on your investment, there are certain things that you may not be considering, so I just wanted to kind of bring them up. And there's probably a lot more than these. I know there's a lot more than these, but the ones you may not be considering is your storage, your area network, your network storage, basically, cost per terabyte right now, what you're paying for in your organization, especially when you consider backups and things like that. your physical versus and virtual servers. So if you've got, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of server space somewhere in your data center that is housing, you know, one or several servers from Lawson, be it a database server that's also sitting out there, your application server, and some of you have LVI, so you got that sitting out there. Considering those licensing for Windows, that may not be a huge cost for you, but it certainly is a cost that's you know, relevant when you're calculating your ROI. You know, your IT audits and compliance costs, like I said, this client we just worked with recently, several weeks worth of work in becoming or maintaining their PCI compliance, so that can be quite challenging, and it's very cost effective to be part of this kind of cloud model. Then, you know, the big obvious one is your IT staff, so your hardware and operations staff that's just basically keeping the lights on these Lawson servers. It's important to kind of consider that cost, but when it comes to considering that cost, you know, we are a managed services shop, so the thing I always kind of think about is you've got training of these users, so your system administrator, your DBA, and all of those resources that you have to train them. You have to, you know, and that's like an ongoing thing, right? So every version, there's training involved. There is the, you know, there's healthcare and benefits and their salaries and the fact that they may leave at any time and you have to replace them, bringing in consultants to kind of backfill and that sort of thing. The cost can add up. And then it's also important to have a 10-year time horizon when you're kind of looking at ROI, because these are long-term investments in your application. And in 10 years, you're very likely to go through 2 sets of servers, and you're very likely to go to 2 to 3 possible upgrades, and lots of MSPs and lots of USPs. So definitely something to consider when you're calculating your return on your investment. Some other things to consider before moving, you know, before deciding you're going to do this, move with UpgradeX is your current OS and database flavors versus the cloud option. So if you're, let's say, an iSeries shop right now, considering going to the cloud, where you have to imagine that you're very likely going to end up on a Windows cloud instance, so there's going to be some things that need to be done before you can do that. Really, from a database standpoint, some of your current database and the way the data is stored in there will be different than the way the data will be stored in the cloud. So there's probably a small project there. It's just things to consider and work with your Infor professional. Number of existing modifications and customization. So we can probably spend a whole webinar on just this topic, because the thing I think most companies are worried about is, well, you know, I've got several hundred customizations to Lawson, and you're telling me that in the cloud I can't really have any customized code, and that is more or less true, but consider that most of your modifications can be probably done using some of the tools that Infor has made available from Infor Process Automation and some of the reporting tools that are out there. You may be able to get most of your modifications moved to some of these other applications where they're not really considered modifications to base code anymore. They're just kind of additional interfaces and changes. And if you can do that, then you're okay. But as of right now, and this is something you have to verify with Infor, I don't believe that they're going to allow you to move any of your let's say 4GL customizations to their cloud, because that is not something that there's a provision there for. Again, I could be wrong, but that's just kind of, there may be some exceptions to the rule. That would be something you'd have to verify with Infor. Then you've got some interfaces to other internal applications and some external ones. So you need to really consider those. Is the cloud going to be a place where you can continue to do those things? Is there a way to do those things a different way that you're not currently considering? And then, you know, how would you go about really things like security and authentication and transferring files and things like that? are those going to be possible with this cloud application, the way your organization works? Another thing to consider is bandwidth, right? I mean, now, currently, you're talking about data going back and forth between your data center and your users, and that may just be a matter of several hundred yards of travel of data, and it's within your internal network. With the cloud applications, you're talking about really becoming an internet application, so it's really sitting up in the cloud, and you're using the bandwidth you have from your network provider to do that. So is that beefy enough? Is that powerful enough to be able to handle what you're trying to do with your the applications that are running the organization or not? And that's another one of those things to kind of discuss with your internal network team and your CTO, and kind of figure out whether or not your organization is in the right place to be able to do that. And then one of the things I was listening to, I went to the Infor Partner Summit a couple months ago in San Antonio, and I was actually listening to one of those videos in preparing for this webinar. And one of the questions that somebody had asked was, well, do we get a dev environment, and do we get some other environments that we can do some work in? And the answer was really that you get a production and you get one for user acceptance testing. So those are the two that you get. You'd have to work with Infor to figure out whether or not they can allow you to have more than just that. So that could be one of those things that could be a deal breaker for you, or it may just add cost. I'm not 100% sure. Definitely a question to keep in mind. I personally am not buying any cloud services from Infor. We're working with several clients that are doing so and moving them to the cloud, and working with some net new accounts that are starting out in the cloud. So that's probably going to be a little easier for them because they don't have anything to really move. But certainly this test and prod with the two environments set up is not something that I'm sure a lot of you are used to. Just a quick summary of this cloud opportunity and what it means to you. Really, there's this kind of best practice security. We didn't talk a whole lot about that, but when we go back to those compliance slides, when you think about what's in place from a compliance standpoint, what Amazon has already put in place is very likely a lot more rigorous than what you have at your organization. Amazon is fanatical about security, so there's that from a network and data security perspective, Amazon has that. Obviously, there's application security that you're still setting up. World-class reliability and performance. Now, it's hard to argue with Amazon's reliability and performance, and it's getting better every day. They're certainly probably not the best when compared to some of the smaller or some of the more robust systems that host cloud applications necessarily. They may not be number one, but they're certainly getting there, and they're becoming a much bigger player in the enterprise space. So when you look at things like Rackspace and a couple of like E3 and other providers of cloud services, I'm sorry, I'm at level 3. There may be some better statistics out there, a few more nines. But historically, at least with the Lawson applications, Amazon's done quite well with their 99.9% uptime. You're talking about some improved processes, so really, especially around change management and things like that, infrastructure management, the fact that that's not really your problem anymore. Disaster recovery, as we talked about. The other thing we didn't actually talk about is utility costs. Now, I know at a lot of my customers, utilities keeping up the data center up have a very high utility cost associated with it, and because there's air conditioning units that are cooling the server room and whatnot. And it isn't so much the fact that the cost is a problem. There is a lot of times there is a maximum allowable power usage at certain parts of campuses that clients are located at, and sometimes they're reaching those, so there's always that sort of limitation of that also. And again, the total cost of ownership really kind of you'd have to figure that out for your organization, but in many cases that I've seen, the total cost of ownership has been very obviously lower going with the cloud. Quick note about our webinars. They're all available at nogalis.com/education. We'll have a link to upcoming webinars near the top. You will not find any new ones up there now, but as of, I believe, after the first week of April, we'll have a whole new set posted there, which really come from your suggestions. So if you have suggestions for new webinars, things you want to learn, please go ahead and use that same site. There's a little form on the right, as you can see there. You can suggest new webinars to us, and we will do our best to get them out to you in a timely fashion. We're going to be at the West Coast Mega User Conference. I don't see any questions coming up, which is unusual. Must be overwhelmed with all the information about the cloud. So if you have any questions and you forgot to and you can't think of them right now, you can always email me directly at tan@nogalis.com, tan@nogalis.com. There are multiple ways on our website that you can contact us at www.nogalis.com. And if you're a fan of Twitter, you can tweet at us your questions to @Nogalis Inc. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm going to stop recording at this time.